Okay, so your next one is this little sheet that looks like this, okay? Now, I'm not going to be able to pull up the flaps and fill it out that way because it doesn't work like that, but we're going to calculate the mean, the median, the mode, and outliers. So I'm just going to write off to the side. You guys can write, if you flip up your flap, you can write what each, like, the definition of each item underneath the flap, and then we'll write what the mean is once we calculate it. Does that make sense? So I'm going to start with mean. I'm going to start with the mean. So I would flip up my flap. So flip your flap up right underneath the word mean. What does the mean stand for? You guys have been calculating the mean forever. Who is that? Is that Kimber saying that? Yeah, Kimber, you are right. It is the average. It's exactly what it is. Kimber, how do I figure out the average? You add up all the numbers and you divide by the number of terms. Divide by the number of terms in your data set. You add up all the numbers and you just divide by the number of terms. So grab your handy dandy calculator. We are going to calculate. Nobody should have their Chromebooks open. We don't need Chromebooks. We're just going to use calculators today. So grab your calculator. We are going to calculate the mean of this data set. So you're going to add up all the numbers. 13 plus 18 plus 13 plus 14 plus 13. Add them all up. We're going to add them all up. So what do you get as your sum? What do you get as the sum? 170? Does anybody else get 170? Okay, Gianna does. How many terms are there? How many numbers did you just add together? 10. So what is 170 divided by 10? 17. So on the front flap where the word mean is, in your calculator, mean looks like this. It's an X with a little bar over it. And I'm going to say that it equals 17. So on your calculator, mean looks like an X with a little bar over it. And our mean is 17. Okay. Next one we have to do is median. The median. How many of you are driving? Justice, what is the median when you're driving? Are you allowed to drive in the median? What is it? Okay, who else is driving? Braden, what's the median? It's the middle of the road. It's the grassy part, right? Like it's that grass part. You're not supposed to drive in there. So the median of our data set is just the middle of the data set when arranged in ascending order. Now, I specifically use the word ascending because that's the word that they typically use on our tests, and we don't ever know what that means. So someone tell me what ascending means. Least to greatest, yeah. When a balloon ascends, it goes up into the air. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way to the top. So smallest to largest, least to greatest. I'm going to write small to large. That's what ascending means. Okay. So that's underneath your little median flap. It's underneath your little median flap. Okay. Well, that means that we have to calculate the median, right? So I have to look at my numbers and I have to put them in order. I have to look at my numbers and put them in order from smallest to largest. So it looks like when I look at my data set, the smallest number there is 13. And I think I have 3 of them. I have 4 of them. Good job. Just trying to see if you're paying attention. Do I have any 14s? Just 1? Good job. Do I have any 15s? What about 16s? 1. 17s? 18s? 2. 19s? What's my next number? 38. Holy cow. Okay. So if I have 10 numbers, what's half of 10? 5. Okay, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right here is the middle, right? Right in between 14 and 14. What number is right in between 14 and 14? Is it 13? So when you have an even number of data points, sometimes you have to think about what you're doing, and you're really finding the average between those 2 points. So let's see, 14 plus 14 divided by 2 is 14. Yeah, what's right in between the number 14 and 14? Just 14. Just 14, okay? So over here on my flap on the front, right, where it says median, I'm going to write 14 equals 14 equals 14. All right. The next one that we're going to do is mode. So I want everyone to lift up their mode flap so we can write the definition of the mode. The mode. What does a la mode mean? If I order an apple pie a la mode, what does that mean? Oh my gosh. I guess that means that I'm old. Is that what that means? So, okay, that won't help you remember it then. Okay. So does anyone remember what the word mode is? Here's how I was taught how to remember mode. My teacher used to say, when you go to a restaurant and you order an apple pie a la mode, that means with ice cream, and you want the most ice cream that you can get, right? So the mode means the most. It just means the data point that appears the most. It's the data point that appears the most. So that's what we're just going to write. It's the number that appears the most. And I'm just going to tell you that there can only be one, because sometimes you're going to look at a data set and it might have 4 7s and 4 9s, and then everything else is just 1, like only one number, right? And you might think, oh, well, there are 2 modes. There's only one. There's only one number that appears the most. So either have it or you don't. You either have a mode or you don't. So what is the mode of our data set? What is the number that appears the most in our data set? 13. So our mode is 13. So it's starting to get crazy around my circle. So I'm going to start trying to write I can't follow the pattern. I'm sorry. So my mode is 13. I can't spin it around. My mode is 13. So mode, number that appears the most. What about the range? I think that you guys all should know what the range is. Say that again, Gianna. What do you do with the first and the last number? Okay. Like if I ask you for the range of ages between you and your siblings, what would you do? Say again. The distance. How do I calculate the distance between 2 points? I'm really finding the what? The difference. Yeah. Good job, you guys. So the range is just the difference. It's the difference, right? That means a subtraction problem of the largest and the smallest number in the data set. So this is the definition that I want you to put under your range flap. It's the smallest and the largest number. It's the difference between the largest and the smallest number in the data set. So we're going to have to subtract them, okay? So if I were to find the range of my data set, what is my largest number in this data set? 38. And what is the smallest number in my data set? So the range equals what? 25. So my range equals 25. So that's what I want you to put on the front flap. Where it says range, I'm going to write equals 25. And again, I know mine is upside down. I can't spin it around. Okay. Our last one that we have to talk about is an outlier. Do you guys see that up here? Outlier to my left. So I'm going to write that right. I'm going to put that right here. Outlier. Okay. So let's talk about an outlier. An outlier is just a number that's very different than the rest of the numbers in the data set. How do you think it's different if it's an outlier? Say that again, Kimber. I can't hear you. It's what? What do you mean like it's on the outside? So if it's very different than what number was very different than the rest of the data points? 38. Why? Because it was much what? It made a big jump. It was a lot bigger. So it's very different than the rest of the data. And by that, we mean that it's either much smaller or much larger. It's very different than the rest of the data. And by that, we mean it's just much smaller or much larger. Okay. An outlier is very far from your mean or your median. So it just lies outside of the data. Okay. Outside of like what the normal data does. Once we learn about box plots, once we start calculating box plots, I'll show you the rule to calculate outliers. Right now, we're just going to write out what our definition is and what the outlier is. So what do you believe the outlier to be of this data set? Yeah, I think you're right. I believe that the outlier is probably 38. Again, once we start talking about box plots, you're going to learn a rule on how to find your outliers. Okay. All right. So that's